All right, good morning, and thank you for joining this webinar from TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship. I'm Davey, and I'm the Executive Director of TENS. And what we love to do in these webinars is to share a little of our expertise, which has been, I stand on the shoulders of many great people who have been Executive Director before me, and also a capacious and generative board of directors. And we, together with the many comments we've received over the decades from churches and practitioners, we've put together some best practices for campaigns, and we'll be going over that today. So thank you for joining this campaign. Again, just want to let you know that we are recording, and we'll send you the recording and the slides after the presentation's over. So today, what I hope that we'll cover is to talk a little bit about the theme that TENS is using for its materials this year. All of you on this call, and in fact, all of you who are in a TENS member diocese, which is most of the dioceses, have free access to the TENS campaign materials. And I'll be sharing that password with you now, and also in the email that comes after after today's presentation. That means that you can download a complete package of stewardship materials, including pledge cards, weekly reflections, prayers of the people, blessings over the offering plate, sample letters, all those kinds of things. So everything you need to run and campaign, and it's also customizable. We give it to you in Microsoft Word so that you can play around with it and put your own information in that. So we'll be going over our theme for this year, which is called Rooted in Abundance. We also want to cover how to use these resources in your campaign. We're going to have a little overview on tough conversations, money and meaning, money and faith, how we have those conversations or approach that in our churches. And so we'll talk a little bit about those best practices and some ideas. We'll talk a little bit about what's happening in 2023. Every year has a little challenge to it, and we are facing challenges this year as well. So we'll talk about some of those, and maybe will be a great opportunity for you all to say some of the things that are on your hearts and minds as you approach this fall's stewardship season. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Our theme is rooted in abundance, and it comes from this passage in Jeremiah. They shall be like a tree planted by water, sending out its roots by the stream. It shall not fear when heat comes, and its leaves shall stay green. In the year of drought, it is not anxious and does not cease to bear fruit. I love this passage as one for us and for one who, a passage about stewardship practitioners. But what I really love most about this is that in the year of the drought, do not be anxious. If you're paying attention to weather patterns in the United States this year, we are burning up, we're in drought, we're in crazy weather all over the place. Yet the church is still acting and needs to act, it has neighbors to serve and work to be done. And so our roots going deep into those places to find the foundation of all of the spiritual welfare that we have. We need to dig deep this year and find it, because there's a lot going on in the world, a lot going on in our communities. So even when times are tough, we bear fruit, and it reminds us that we can do that. So I hope that as we move through this theme, and as you think about implementing it in your own stewardship practice this year, we remember that we have been given such abundance in the creation that everything we do is an act of hospitality. It's an act of feeding our neighbors, and that we plant and sow seeds in this garden so that they can bloom and present beautiful fruit to our neighbors, to those who need us. And let's remember that our neighbors are ourselves, our own communities of faith, the people who need our pastoral care and love, and the people who show up every day and every week. And there are our extended community, our neighbors that live near us, our neighbors who live further away, our neighbors on the other side of the world. Our churches do so much for the world, and it's always beautiful to see how you all engage your neighbors. But we can do this work because we're grounded. We're grounded in abundance and generosity and welcome. And so we're inspired to share as we've been given so much. As we move into campaign season, I want to remind you of a few hallmarks, some things that you need to put on your checklist. Make sure we're doing these things together. So implement your best practices. Your stewardship team should be meeting now and really forming the structure of what your campaign is going to be. Talk about how you want to run it. What is it going to be like? Are you going to do small groups or house meetings? Are you going to do testimonials in your church? What materials do you need to create? There's a webinar on our previous webinars page from our website that goes into great detail about how to craft your case for support and your materials for campaigns. Take a look at that and see if there are any pointers as you recreate the materials for this year's campaign. Make sure that you have lots of ways for people to access your campaign electronically, in good old paper form, and passing the plate and handing out envelopes, whatever the practices are in your congregation, make sure that you're ready to go for your kickoff. Our resource library is chock full of tips and tools on setting things up, on forming ourselves, and on cleaning up and doing the follow-up work. And all that information is free for you, so check it out. If you're new to stewardship especially, it's a good reading list for things to prepare for. We want to build hype in our campaign season. And I've been there. I perhaps have, in the many decades that I've done stewardship in churches, I may have even stood up and said, "Oh, it's stewardship time again. Here we go." And I just want to say, don't do that. Don't approach a stewardship campaign by saying it's last year's campaign. It's the same old thing. It's fall again. We must be fundraising. No, it's a new experience. Build the hype. Get people excited that what you're doing here is to support your ministry, to do something new in the world. Our underlying message in stewardship is that every dollar raised, every hour of volunteer service, every good idea that's donated by our members goes directly into ministry. We don't squander any of it. We turn it all into mission and ministry for our community. So let's remember that when we're speaking about raising money, when we're drawing awareness to the time and the talent that we're asking people to share, it's not just to staff up committees or to waste our time. It is to put effort forth and serve our neighbors and get into the mission of the church. So build the hype. Use your newsletter and your social media and your email and announcement time, and even the occasional sermon throughout the year to remind people that we engage this work faithfully. Make sure everyone in your church knows that you're doing this campaign. It should be the worst kept secret. It should be, raised from the rooftops. Shout the message out that what you're doing is asking everyone to commit themselves to the mission and to offer up the ways that they intend to support the church this year. It's really important that we give them lots of ways to do that. It's not just our treasure that we're asking for, it's our time and our talent as well. Make sure that people know that there are lots of ways that the church needs them, and it's not just about asking for money. We'll be focusing on that a little today because that's part of the work of the Episcopal Network for Stewardship, but I never wanted us to forget that we're raising awareness for our ministries. And then build in plenty of time for reflection. Anything that's done right in the church should be surrounded and lifted up by prayer and reflection and dialogue. These are the essential things that our Episcopal heritage gives us, that we always engage each other in meaningful conversation about things, when it's easy, when it's difficult, when we're trying to get the message out, dialogue is really important. So use our weekly reflection tools to start great conversations in your congregation. Use these opportunities to encourage people to meditate and pray and discern how they will be able to share their gifts with your community this year and how the church will use their gifts to fund and to drive the mission forward. Those weekly inserts, they showcase diverse messages of abundance in our communities of faith. If you've been using TENS materials for a long time, you'll notice a little shift this year. We turned away in this series from matching it up exactly to the gospel each week from September through November. And instead we have an amazing cohort of faith leaders across many cultures, sharing their stories of abundance and hospitality in the hopes that we can showcase the fact that abundance comes in lots of forms, things that we don't always think about or remember to be grateful for. So as you use these reflections this year, really dig deep into why we are so deeply recognizing our abundance and why our campaigns flourish, why our mission flourishes when we start and end with gratitude and grace. You can use those weekly inserts as sermon starters, as rectors forums, as dialogue partners in your small group meetings. And there's always a series of questions that follow each of those reflections so that you can engage that in essential dialogue with each other. I see we have a question. Kathy in Kansas City. Oh, she's just telling us that there's a storm in Kansas. Kathy, we pray for your and your neighbors good health and welfare in your storm. If we drop off, we'll wish you the best and send you the materials. Thanks for letting us know. Testimonials are the best way to communicate impact and the message of your campaign. And I say this because you can put the priest up in front of the church, you can bring a stewardship person up in front of the church, and they can talk to people about practices and theology. But it's really when our members share their own stories of commitment that we get, I think, the most impact. We learn deeply how the people we pray with and sit next to in the pews are deeply impacted by the work and the faith and the community that we have formed. So this year, if you're not practicing some kind of storytelling in your campaign work, please find some ways to do it. You can write stories and put them in your bulletin. If people don't want to do public speaking, some people are great with videos. They'll take a 30-second video on their phone and send it in, and you can send it out in the newsletter. If people feel comfortable coming up during announcement time and doing what in a lot of congregations we call that minute for mission, or whatever people say, this is what made me walk in the doors or drive into the parking lot that first Sunday. And then this is why I kept coming back. This is why I identified this as my home, as my spiritual home. Or maybe people will talk about which program they feel the most affinity for, or maybe it's something that, their kids have gone through years of godly play and they love the fact that these little humans have become thinking, wonderful Christians and individuals. And so maybe they're sharing their story about that. All the things that we do, and it's not just church, right? So we learn from church how to be better in our workplace, how to raise better families, how to communicate with friends better, how to navigate the difficulties of life, and how to seek support and guidance and community when we most need it. So maybe people will tell very personal stories about how the church or programs of the church have impacted them and changed their lives. And those are things, when we hear those stories, they're worth supporting with our time and our talent and our treasure. I love it when people talk about how strong the community is and why they have accepted it, why they've loved it, why they keep coming back. So incorporate storytelling. In our resource library, you'll find a whole article on tips to create stories, what makes for a good story, and you can learn a little bit more about it. Also, really talk about the impact of your programs. This is something we don't always do in our churches. We might run a food pantry or a tutoring program or a senior citizens outreach or any number of programs. And we know that they're running, we see people doing them, we know who the volunteers are, but we don't always hear about the change that they make in the world. And bringing those stories back into the congregation and disseminating them either through announcements or intentional stewardship or storytelling or in your newsletter or social media. This is a great way to remind people that every day, every week, lives are being impacted and changed by the work that we're doing, by the ways that we're supporting the church, and by our community of faith. So ask some volunteers who run your programs, if it's whatever kind of a ministry it is, ask the volunteers to do a quick video about why it means something to them or what the joy is in serving. And if it's appropriate, ask people who benefit from the ministry. Maybe it's anonymous if people don't want to share like that they get food from the food pantry and talk about what it means for their family to have that bag of groceries every week. If they want to share their face and their name with that, that's great. If they don't, sometimes just writing down that story or asking them what it means to them so that we can share that with our members, so that we can tell people that it's not just about it is important to tell people the number of people we serve. It's even better when we can humanize those stories and talk about impact. Impact is really important. And we sometimes don't do this when we talk about our ministries. We talk about them sort of in very general terms, or maybe, it's running, it's on budget, it's going well. We don't always talk about lives changing. And we're in the business of changing lives in the church. So tell those stories. It will really make a difference in how people feel about supporting their programs and what the world would be like if this ministry stopped existing. If we didn't have people or resources to run it, who'd be left out? Who would we not be serving? And sometimes that, I don't want us to go running down a fear spiral there, but sometimes knowing what this program really means is really important to us. Take this opportunity in your stewardship to make planned giving a part of your campaign. It doesn't water down the message of asking for a gift now and asking people to consider what they might do for the legacy of the church later. If the only thing you're doing is putting on your pledge card a little reminder that they have either made a provision for the church in their estate, or they would like more information, it's a great way to just put out that soft ask. In giving, especially in planned giving, we say that it takes sometimes 7 times for that message, that seed, to start its roots and to get the message out. So the more often we provide these gentle reminders, the better we can help people remember that the church needs their gifts now and later. I work with a lot of donors who see legacy gift as a part of their stewardship because they want their pledge to remain after they're no longer able to make that weekly or monthly or annual pledge to the church. And so they set up, they can be small endowments, or they can be a small fund to continuously support the church after they're no longer able to make those gifts. This sort of pledge legacy is a really beautiful spiritual practice, and it's one of those things that in the stewardship campaign we can talk about. Let's always remember that the number one reason people do not leave a legacy gift is because they weren't asked to. And let's also remember that our nonprofit brothers and sisters out there are asking. Your alma mater, the symphony, your zoo, all of these organizations are very good at asking people to give gifts now and to think about gifts later. And so our churches also should be in this mindset of thinking about how we do more planned giving. Now, I'm going to put him on the spot here. I know that Charles Clowen is on today's call. And Charles, if you'd raise your hand and then zoom into the room, I'd love for you to give a couple of thoughts on planned giving. You're our reigning expert. Are you here with?
Thank you, Davey.
Thank you, Charles.
To me, it's the, as Davey said, the ongoing reminding people. We always put on our pledge card, yes, I have remembered, or we have remembered our church in our will estate plans. Two of them are different. Your will only covers part of what you have. You have a 401k, that's part of your estate. It's not covered by a will. Life insurance is not covered by a will, it's covered by beneficiaries. So many people do beneficiaries as opposed to a will, but both are fine. And then I believe it needs to be on the pledge card. And what we always do is on All Saints Day, we put the names of the people in our Cathedral Legacy Society on the front page. And we thank them. And then we have a cake, a special cake at hospitality hour to remind everybody how wonderful that is. What I find by having I remember the church in my pledge card every year when I was rector, I found out there were 2 or 3 or 4 people who checked that off. And secondly, we had a legacy society. If you can afford a cake, your parish can afford a legacy society. These are people who have remembered the church in their will and estate plans. When they check it off on your pledge card, you then send them a letter saying, would you please join our legacy society? And you also make sure you have a check off, yes, I want to be anonymous, or yet, no, you can publish my name. And again, we used to the fourth Sunday of Lent, which is Refreshment Sunday, honor everybody in the Legacy Society, give a short announcement, like 3 or 4 minutes about it, and invite people to come and have some cake. Again, it's small things. I had a finance chair, it's the largest giver in my parish. And he listened to me talk. After his wife died, his life changed, and he then made a significant legacy gift to the church. Quite often people redo their wills when something important happens. A brother dies, a wife dies, a husband dies, a child dies, they want to rewrite their will. Also, what I recommend in that as a planned giving officer is people do it percentage-wise. As you listen to this message today, you could probably go home right now, spend 2 or 3 hours and come up with your net worth. What that'll be when you die, who knows? The house you love may be worth twice as what it is today, or it could be worth 7/8 of what it is today. Stock market could be at 40,000 or 20,000. So by doing percentages, I recommend is the best way to do it. I've done that with my church and my charity. So it's a matter of percentage of your estate, of your will, of your life insurance for the church. And the reason we publish names is if people sit there in church saying, well, if Joe can do it, I can do it. You know, Bill and I both serve on the altar together as Eucharistic ministers. If he can remember the church in his estate plan, I can too. So that's important. And as a parish priest, I would ask people about if they remember the church in the will, and I got to know them well. Again, a way of keeping what you care about. It's called the last will and testament. I talk about this, I say there's the Old Testament, the New Testament about Jesus, and then there's your last will and testament. It's called the last will and testament. It's what you care about in your life. My life, what do I care about? My 4 children, the American Friends, the Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem, Hobart College, Berkeley Divinity School, and St. Thomas's Episcopal Church, where I served as director for 18 years. So to me, it's thankful for what you're thankful for in your life is your testament to what was important, what is important. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. You are always an inspiration. And thank you for always joining TENS and telling your message about planned giving. You have so many great resources for us. TENS does have a few resources for planned giving. I saw that question up in the chat. There's a webinar on our page you can take a look at about how to start or create or continue your legacy work. We don't, it's not our core business. And so there are other people who do it better than we. The Episcopal Church Foundation is particularly good, and they will work with your congregation on setting up the finance part and all of that. We provide a little best practice. So lots of resources out there. We can help guide you in the right way. And Charles has written a couple of books about it. So he's a famous author. You can find him on Amazon. And he's written some great books about keeping that conversation going. I also saw a question about our Spanish title, and I will answer that offline. It takes more time than I think we have this morning to talk about it. But thank you for that. So other things that we need to remember to do in our stewardship campaigns is ensure that there are online ways for people to make your gifts. And it's not just our millennials and our Gen Z and our late Gen X members who are making their gifts online. But since the pandemic, 88% of people age 66 and above are making gifts online to nonprofits and churches. So this is becoming a very normalized practice. And it's just easier. Frankly, it is so much easier for congregations to do this and to offer variety for members to make their gifts. So if you haven't yet adopted some kind of virtual offering plate or some kind of online donation platform, first check with your diocese. There may be a system that they are a part of and that they are subsidizing and making available to congregations. Many of our dioceses do. If not, we have some ideas at TENS, and I can refer you to those. But do some research. We have a webinar that goes through the different pluses and minuses and costs of the most common platforms out there. And we're happy to help you think that through. But making a virtual offering plate is really important. It allows people who don't necessarily carry cash to make a gift to your church. If I came into your church, for example, I'd have like a couple of dusty dollar bills, if that, in my wallet, because I use my phone or my debit card for almost everything these days. And that's becoming more and more common. So as you think about it, make sure that there are some ways to implement it. And we can talk more about that if you have questions. When you maximize the opportunity for people to give, you maximize your donation. And so it's also good that your treasurer, your parish administrator know how to accept the other kinds of gifts that people might want to make to their church. Your people who are living on retirement income often have to spend that required minimum distribution as a part of their annual payout, and when they have to claim that after age 70 and a half. And so a lot of people who have retirement accounts use part of that to make their charitable gifts each year. You can also give directly from a retirement account through a qualified charitable distribution. It comes in a sort of a bank check to your church, and you have to set that up with your retirement account. But some people make one-off gifts or their whole annual campaign gifts through their retirement accounts. Check out with your provider to see what makes the most sense. And if you're a treasurer, a parish administrator, a stewardship campaign chair, make sure people know that they can do that. It's not just about what's in their checking account. People can also give through other ways. Some folks have donor advised funds where they've made a gift, and the draw from that is something that's available to them to disperse through grants every year. And people make those grants to their church or other institutions that they support. So some people will do that. They require a slightly different letter of acknowledgement because they're not making a pledge, they're making a grant. And so the IRS is very particular about that. Make sure that your stewardship chair or your finance folks know the difference between that and send them the right acknowledgement letter so they can fill out their tax information correctly. And if you're not familiar with that, your diocesan finance office can help you. I can help you. We can figure that one out together. People also use direct bank checks, set it up as a bill pay kind of thing to pay off their regular gifts. And that can be set up in whatever way that makes sense to you. Of course, we're talking about online giving and mobile giving, workplace and matching gifts, and stock and securities. A lot of people, even with the poor market performances that we've had, or I would say the roller coaster of market performance that we've had, there's some appreciated stock out there. And so people might use that to make their year-end gift and make a tax-wise gift to offset some of those capital gains and to make a gift to their church. So just make sure that you know that there are lots of ways that people can make gifts, and the more that you offer them, the more people will think creatively, and perhaps it will increase the amount that they can give. They're only thinking about what's in their checking account and not what they might have in appreciated securities or retirement accounts, then they're perhaps missing an opportunity to give a more robust or generous gift. Your diocesan finance office can work you through any of the intricacies on that if you have really specific questions. How we ask for money is also really important. And I want to start this off by saying it's okay to talk about money in church. The number one thing I get when I talk to people about stewardship is, we don't want to talk about money in church all the time. Why are we doing this? It's not our Christian value to talk about fundraising. Well, friends, I'm here to tell you that it is. And I'm also here to tell you that Jesus spent 40% of his ministry and mission, that's 16 of the 40 parables, talking about money, stuff, and possessions and our attachments to them as either the metaphor or the object of the story. This is really important to know because money in the first century, as in the 21st century, is one of those things that we just can't escape. We need to encounter it and to engage it faithfully to find the right way to channel it and talk about it in church so that it doesn't feel slimy and transactional and manipulative, but instead it feels like we're giving opportunity and giving people a chance to say thank you and finding great ways to engage the conversations of money and meaning. So whether this is your first campaign or you're a veteran campaigner, know that it's okay. You have permission to talk about money in church and to do it faithfully. So I've put out these 5 hypothetical scenarios to help you, give you some language. You'll put these in your own words, but to give you some language about how to ask people for money. Now, we don't always do one-on-one, face-to-face campaigning in our congregations. Sometimes we send out letters and then we do follow-ups. But one of the things that unifies all asks for money, in my opinion, is that we should ask people to join us in making a gift. This is a really important piece of language, and it ensures, or it assumes 2 things. The very first thing is that you yourself have already made your gift. And so I like to remind our clergy, our vestry, our stewardship committee, our finance team, they should be the very first gifts that are made, or the first pledges that are made to your campaign each year. In fact, if you can do it, it's really lovely to have them secured before the kickoff date, before your first Sunday, because then you can come into kickoff saying, our leadership is 100% behind the campaign. Everyone has made a commitment from your leadership team, and now we're asking you to join us. Or you can come in and say, we've already raised 20% of the funds that we need to run for our stewardship goal, or to meet our budget, or to fund our mission, however you want to massage that language. But the very first thing is that your leadership should be making their gifts. And you should be able to say, we have 100% of our leadership committed to the campaign. Then you, when you're following up with people, when the vestry or the finance team or the stewardship team, depending on how you set your campaign up, is calling or emailing folks saying, we haven't received your pledge paperwork yet. Would you like to talk about that? Will you join me? I've given you some language here to help you start those conversations off. So when we're talking about renewals, remind people about the program. So if we're asking them to make last year's gift, or to think about what they did last year and renew their support for the church, you've been a longtime member and donor to our church. We're really grateful for you. This year, this is what we're doing. We're raising money for this and that and the other thing. And we'd like you to pay attention to that and know that we're doing great things with the ideas, the wealth, works, and wisdom that you donate to our church. Sometimes our finance team and our stewardship team see the need to increase our goal. Maybe it's by a percentage. We'd like to increase 10% over last year, or we're really trying to do something big and we need people to stretch and make a stretch goal this year. And so, ask people right up front, this is why we're doing this. This is what it will achieve. Cast that vision for the future, and then ask people if they can make that stretch gift. When someone in your congregation is having a tough time, when it's, you've heard about this, about it, your pastor might say, before you reach out to Dick and Bill this year, you might want to think about this, or there's something going on, or, whatever they say to you. That doesn't mean we shouldn't ask them, doesn't mean we should drop them off our list of people to talk to about making a gift, because that's insulting. That tells them, we don't think you can do it. You don't care about the church. We're not even going to ask you. No, give them the opportunity to join in the campaign and set an amount that works for them, or to tell you, I can't do it this year, but I'll pray for you, or I'll be able to volunteer or do these other things, and give them that moment of grace where they can say, honestly, I really value this congregation, but this is what I'm going through this year. So even when unless it's just totally crazy circumstances and your pastor says, don't talk to them about giving this year, make sure that you invite people, even when they're going through a rough patch, to consider how they can support the church. Because the church hopefully is supporting them. And finally, when you are dealing with newcomers, let's remember to say, you might not be familiar with how we do church here, or how we do our budget. Maybe newcomers have coming from a different tradition. So have some information about them, like, here's what people generally give. Here are some ideas on average gift size. Here are ways that people participate in our community. There are ways to do that. So I'm seeing some great comments in the chat. Marilyn says there are some people with mental illness or dementia. Yeah, if it would upset someone to ask them for money, then you're making a pastoral decision not to, and that makes perfect sense. There are some people who we just gracefully want to provide the space and a community for them to worship in, and that's enough. And so, yeah, if there's a circumstance that you know would be really terrible, to talk with that person, to communicate, then make sure make sure you're responding to that. Robin says, if we say we've already got the money from leadership, will it make the congregation think they don't need to contribute? No, in fact, it does the opposite. I think if you turned out and said, we have all the money we need, then, people would say, well, why are you asking me? But if you are saying, we're already this far in, and now we need you to join us to get the other way, it helps people know that the hill that we need to climb isn't so high and isn't so steep. We're already making some headway. There's already great support and momentum for the campaign. People are ready to accept this. So it usually has the opposite effect. We might not think that because we think, once people hear that, but in fact, it proves itself over and over again that if there's some tailwind going into the campaign, then our campaign flies more easily. Let's see, there's some more stuff in here. Oh, there's a conversation about online giving and fees. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the elephant in the room of transactional giving platforms and the fact that they take a little cut of the donation. And that's the cost of their doing business, right? That's how they make their money and provide that tool for you to be able to solicit gifts. In my own congregation, it took our finance team until the pandemic. So I'd been working on them for about 20 years to say we need to do something about online gifts. And they resisted because of those fees. And those fees are hard to swallow sometimes. We're thinking somebody's making their best gift and then they're losing 3% of it to some big tech firm somewhere that's doing something. That feels hard to talk about. But in fact, it enables us to make our gifts online, and we raise more money in church online when we have a fully implemented tool. So let me give you the statistic. The average gift size for someone to make a one-time gift, right? So that person that you're like, will you support me? Maybe it's a visitor, maybe it's someone. If the average gift is $55, okay, great. That's a nice gift. The average online gift is $99. So people just give more online. Now, this is across all demographics. It's an aggregate average statistic. But what it says is that people who make gifts online, they appreciate it, they give more regularly. It's so easy to toggle that little button over that says make this a recurring gift, and then you never have to worry about that money not coming in. So lots of positives for implementing an online transaction program, and those fees are a part of it. It's a part of doing business. My church and many churches just put that as a cost, as an expense line. We anticipate we're going to have to spend this much money raising money this year, and we take a little percentage of what we think. But you can also, most of those online fundraising platforms give the donor the option of increasing their gift by 3% to cover the cost of that transaction, which is to say, if I give $100 and the church only gets 97, they give me the option of giving 103. So the church gets its whole 100. And so that is a way, and I use 3% as a general number, usually hovers around that between 2.5 and sort of 3.5 and the higher end, depending on the platform. But those are just ways to talk about it. You're never gonna, some people will never give online because of it. Some people will, and they'll understand it, and you can help them understand it by explaining it to them. So I really appreciate that. Tom, thank you for reiterating that a lot of online donor or platforms will allow people to cover the cost of that donation so that the church doesn't have to. Great question. Thank you for asking it. Let's talk a little bit about wading into that difficult conversation about money. And really, it's important first that we say, is a safe place. Not only did Jesus do it a lot, and we can do it, but we're here in dialogue. And we all have stuff about money, and we bring it to any conversation about money. I often say that when we are engaging the work of stewardship and asking people to join us in a campaign, to be prepared for perhaps a pastoral conversation rather than a financial one. People might tell you all kinds of things about what's going on in their life or the circumstances that have led up to their ability either to be very generous or to pull back. Whatever it is, people tell very deeply personal stories about money. So make it a safe place. Know that there's confidence there, that you're not going to share things, but do say something like, you've shared something really big with me. Would you like a conversation with our priest about that? Can I pass this along? Or can I just suggest that they reach out to you and you can explain what's going on? Sometimes we hear things that we think, oh, our priest might want to know that. Or maybe our priest doesn't know that they're losing their job or that they have a terminal diagnosis or whatever they might tell you, or that, you know, they've won the lottery or whatever they want to say. Ask, can I share that information with our clergy team, with our pastoral resource team? Is there any support you need from us? How can we help you with this? Keep things really positive. Sometimes when we're talking about money, people have that little list of things that they've been unhappy about in church for a while and they pull it out, and it's fine. Sometimes we have big shoulders, we listen, we have generous hearts and open ears. But let's reframe those conversations. Try to get people to talk about what they do like and what is possible, and say if they're really having a problem, again, I don't want to triangulate here. I don't want to hold your frustration. It sounds like you should have a conversation with whoever that they should have that conversation with. If you're doing your stewardship in small groups, make sure that the people who lead those small groups have some support, have some training on how to have a safe space and good conversation, nurture those online or small group communities so that you're not just sending people out there to do the work, but you're giving them the support and the training that they need. This is really important. It also helps the people who are leading groups to feel more easily committed to it. Well, let's talk about a couple things that might be coming up this year. So there's economic fallout, and there has been economic fallout for years related to the pandemic. And now we have inflation, and we have crazy weather patterns. We have lots of ways that people are disrupted and distracted, and perhaps are going through some really traumatic experiences that could impact their giving. So let's talk about when those challenges come up. The first thing I think that's really important to know is that there's no shame in a household pledging less than they did last year. We should make that normalized. You know, you make your best gift that's for your family, that's for the church. You've prayed about it. I believe that you've discerned the gift that you're about to make. And so I want you to make the one that works for you. Don't push yourself into an uncomfortable place of giving. Remember that not everybody is struggling in the same way. So if there's a situation in your town or in the world, not everybody reacts to it the same way. They might get their resources from a different place. They might be steady when other people are struggling. So don't assume that there aren't people who could actually step up and make different kinds of gifts if your other people in the community might be struggling. So it's just a little reminder that we all have different circumstances, and we shouldn't apply a one-size-fits-all thinking to it. Again, a reminder, every conversation about pledges is a pastoral one. I often put my list of people I'm going to contact in front of the clergy and say, let me know if there's anyone on this list that I shouldn't talk to, or that I should be more gentle with than I might, or if there's something going on I need to know. And my pledge back to them is I'll do the same. If I learn something and they need to talk to you, I'll facilitate that and then step back so that you can do that work as the pastor. Let's remember that we've been through tough times. We'll be through tough times again. Those recessions, they scar us, but they don't often kill us. And so when we're going through a hard time, or this year, some news reports say we're about to go into something. Other news reports say, ignore what those other people are saying. Whoever you believe about what's happening in the economy in 2024, know that we've been through tough times, that this will pass, and that we'll be stronger when we come through it. So for those people who are worried about that, just remind them that we've been here before and we'll get through it. Also, we have to have hope. We have to have hope that the right things will happen. If our faith isn't based on hope, then what is it? What are we doing with it, right? The Christian hope that all shall be well is really important for us to know. And just because the community is suffering and maybe our finances are tricky, the church actually needs to step up often when the community is struggling, and increase its work in the world because people are suffering and we want to respond to that. So remember that we still have to do the work even when it's tough. Always, when you are perhaps going into a budget year that's going to be really tough, and you know it up front, we're maybe having to cut something or pull back on a beloved ministry. We might be losing a staff person or changing the hours that we're paying someone. Those are hard conversations because they really impact us. But if we get out ahead of them, then we have a way to talk about them when people say, well, you're cutting programs. Why do you need me to support the church? Or, I really loved that program and I don't want to give to the church if that program isn't there, or whatever they might say. And we hear it all in stewardship. We hear grace and we hear fear. And sometimes those conversations are interwoven. Keep our conversations focused on mission. Our neighbors are still there. They're still needing to be served. And so whatever we're doing, we're going to find a way to do it. Sometimes that means rolling up our sleeves and volunteers acting more. Sometimes it means, going into our reserves or making taking a risk to do something, even though we don't know where the money's coming from. We are people of boldness sometimes when we need to be. Of course, we need to be solvent at the end of the day. We need to find ways to make our churches sustainable, but know that we need to continue that. Remind people that we've been through some really tough times recently, and if they've applied for government aid, if they've applied to grants to do things from the Episcopal Church or other sources, if they've appealed to their congregation for relief or subsidy or support, that these are things that don't weaken us, they strengthen us. And so when we're getting subsidy, when we're getting support, it's other congregations in our diocese that are sharing their joy and their gratitude with the diocese so that it can support churches that are going through a tough time. Remind people that sometimes we're on either side of that conversation, and that it's really important to know your church, your leadership are out there securing the needs and the funds that our church needs. We're really working hard to keep this budget going. Finally, remember that there are some members who can make extraordinary gifts. And maybe you've been saving them for a rainy day or for a future capital campaign or a really big project that's coming up. But maybe this is the year that you need to ask them for that gift. There are people who might, they might have said, I've got $25,000 and I will give it to the church when you need it. And you might be saying, well, hold off, I don't need it just yet, but I'm going to ask you, this might be the year. So think about that when people have those kinds of resources. Know if you're holding on to them, that this might be the time. I'm seeing some questions. I love these questions. Thank you. And also thank you for answering each other's questions. It's a question about when the weekly campaign starts. It starts the September the 17th is the first one. So as you come back from August vacations and start your program year, September 17th is the first of the weekly reflections, and it goes through Christ the King. So you'll have a weekly reflection each week from September 17th on. I love that. TENS does have somebody's asked if we have a stewardship prayer. We have prayers of the people that are themed around the, that are written around the theme. We have prayers for the in-gathering, prayers at the offertory, and a post-communion prayer that you can use during your stewardship season. So take a look at those resources and see how they may fit into your liturgy. When we do things liturgically that draw a line under the work we're doing in our mission and our congregation, it just helps people to continuously identify that. So yes, please take advantage of those resources. Deirdre says, if we know that in the coming year, we might have reduced hours or elimination of a staff position, do we state that at the outset? Deirdre, I do believe that you do want to stay positive. Of course, you don't want to go into a campaign saying the sky is falling and the world is falling apart and it's a terrible year. But if there are things that are out there that are known in the congregation, this is where it's happening, then you must assume that people who are engaging in your stewardship campaign have heard that too, and that they know about it. And so when you don't address it, then they have questions perhaps. And so we go into those moments of challenging budgets by saying, here's what we're doing to address it. At the end of the day, still, if you could all go on mute, if you're not. That would be helpful. So whatever you're doing to kind of create that moment, I lost my train of thought there, sorry. But yes, don't go negative, find the positive way. And we're about to go through some appreciative inquiry tips in a moment to see how we can turn some of those conversations around. Mary Jane asks if we should start the liturgical resources in September. You know, it's all up to you. Some people like to do it just for the window of their campaign. You know, more stewardship reflection, the better. I like to start them in September and go right through, regardless of when the campaign window is, because it just keeps generating more congregation. So that's good. Christ the King is the last Sunday in November this year, I think. I don't know. It's the last Sunday before Advent. So I can't look at my calendar and talk at the same time, apparently. So we'll get that date for you. Thank you for asking. Let's talk about how to talk about stewardship in times of uncertainty. Goodness knows, going into another election cycle, there's a war in Europe, there's weather happening everywhere. There's a looming, perhaps, recession. People do feel uncertain. And we're still coming out of the pandemic moment, right? We're still rebuilding, we're still regathering, we're still rethinking how we do church. So there's some uncertainty out there. Let's remember that this is not a new story for us as Christians. We were born into uncertainty. We were born into a confusing story of our prophet dying and being risen and then ascending, and the rest of us having to figure out how to carry that message forward in a place and a time that wasn't welcoming to it. This is not so unlike where we are today, right? We are countercultural people. We try to get the message out there. We live in uncertain times. We rely on our hope and our vision for the kingdom of God. For those of you preaching tomorrow, you've got all these great examples of what the kingdom of God is like. Mustard seeds, pearls, all of it. It's beautiful. So draw on these stories of the kingdom and the reign of God and the vision we enact and we imagine in the world. And then that's the Christian hope. Also remind people that pledges can be changed. You're not writing this thing in stone. You're not signing your name in blood. You're not doing something that can't be changed with a simple phone call or an email to the treasurer. And so when people are hedging, oh, I don't really know if I can make this gift, or I'm really worried I might lose my job next year. I always say, we want you to make the best gift for you and your household. And if that means that you can't complete the pledge that you've made, just let us know. Let us know as soon as you know, and then we'll support you in what you need to do and how you need to be. But don't hold back on your gift. Know that you can change it, and there's no shame. This is a moment of grace, not a moment of guilt. So help people understand that they can change their pledge forms. Let's talk a little bit about appreciative inquiry. This is that, what do we do not to be negative in a campaign? So appreciative inquiry, if you've never used it before, you've probably come across it in church. You might not have heard it by that name, but it's where we look at what's possible and what's good, and we try and frame our conversations with that positivity going forward. That's not to say that we're burying our heads in the sand, imagining that there's nothing wrong, but it's saying, how do we make something better out of what exists? What's the promise in this? What's positive about this? So think about employing some appreciative inquiry. This is a very brief thing, and I've got a couple of teasers in the next slide, but you can watch YouTube videos for hours and hours about appreciative inquiry. You can read lots of articles and books about it too. It's a beautiful process, and it can really help you take those negative or those worrying conversations and frame them right from the outset. So asking those questions that come in the weekly reflection, they're all open, positive. What do you think? What do you imagine? What's your experience? Ask people what is going well. What do they love about the church? What's really exciting to them? What do they want to support? What would you do if money were no object? Would you send a rocket to the moon, or would you start a new food pantry, or how would you engage your neighbors? What is the way that you would do it? And what's positive about that? Why is that exciting to you? What are people doing around you that inspires you? Leaders, nonprofits, speakers, pastors, what are they saying that inspires you, that makes you want to roll up your sleeves and get out there and do good for the world? And then what are your passions and your gifts? We all have a series of gifts, and Paul reminds us that there are lots of them, and there are even more than Paul names in his epistles. But as we find those gifts, we want to share them with the world. Some people are great bakers. Some people know how to design flyers. Some people can create a website. Some people sing beautifully. What is it that their gift is, your gift is, that can enliven and enlighten and make your church experience more beautiful? Dwell on those. Ask people about those gifts. Start conversation about what you're passionate about. If they say I'm passionate about cooking, it has nothing to do with church. Like, the church is all about a meal every Sunday, right? What does cooking not have to do with feeding people? And if you're feeding people, you're nurturing people and nourishing them. How does that, does anything strike with you and passion about that? How do we do this work? Help people make the connections between the things that they love in their lives and the things that the church needs for them. I love the conversation that's coming up about words and phrases that we use. Not everybody likes the word pledge. Some people like intention. Not everybody likes the word campaign. They use program. Not everybody likes the word stewardship. They like, use the words that make sense in your community and define them and have people be on the same page. So don't force language, don't force anything. Don't force language, don't force ideas, but encourage people to adopt the phrases that make sense to them. And words matter. Choices in the words that we use matter, and you can change it. This year it's a pledge, next year it's an intention, sometimes it's a promise, sometimes it's what we do. So find the ways that make sense. Anne asks that, we have several givers who are very regular in their gifts, but don't pledge. I love this question. And I love these people, right? So last year, I reached out to someone in my own church who I know is very faithful and who makes very generous gifts, but they hadn't submitted a pledge form. And I was wondering, what's your intention for the year? How would you like to support? And they wrote me a really passionate response saying, I don't want to be in debt to anyone. I believe theologically that we shouldn't be indebted. And so I don't fill out pledge paperwork because I don't believe in it. Okay, that's beautiful. That's a statement of faith and theology. And then they went on to say, I will give, and I'll give it the amount that I've given, and you can count on it, but I'm not going to sign a pledge form for you. This is a great opening into our younger donors, our late millennials, our Gen Zs. They're probably never going to fill out pledge paperwork. They can't find their checkbooks, and I'm not being disparaging about that. They don't think about things that way. They make gifts on their phone. They do things online. If paperwork is not really important to them. And so if our churches don't start adapting to the ways that people want to give, including pledge paperwork, we're going to start hitting up against a cultural clash there. And we don't want that. So let's be adaptable and find ways to do that. And then for those finance and treasurer folks that are out there who say, well, what do we do with someone who doesn't fill out a paperwork, but that they give regularly? I encourage our treasurer to count those as gifts that are going to come in. And then we, because they've always done it. They're going to give this amount, even if they don't say they're going to do it, but they do it every year. You can count it as a part of your budget. And if it's a really big amount, you might want to check with them. This is a really important part of our stewardship. This represents a big gift to us. Is this something that you'll do this year? Can you make this commitment even if you don't fill out paperwork? Can we expect it? Can we spend against it? Can we think about it coming in? And have those kinds of conversations if you really need to. But if it's really regular, just move it over into the yes column and deal with anything that comes up later. I'm reading your comments to see where we go. Virginia asks, will we receive the slide deck? Yes, you will. Al reminds us not to be too cute in our language. Thank you. It's still a serious business. So adapt, but don't be smarmy. And find the ways that make sense out of that. So these are great. Thank you. You guys are answering each other's questions, and I love that. Keep going with it. Sarah asks, what do I think about QR codes? I think a lot about QR codes, and I think that they are essential for those of us who never have our phone far from our hands. I like them in a pew card where you can, if you're a visitor, you can take a snapshot, link it right to your donation page, make a gift right there during the offertory. I know a lot of congregations that put it in their bulletin at the offertory. Here's a place where you can make your gift. If you don't have something to put in the plate, or you don't want the plate to come down your aisle, we're still trying to deal with how we feel about touching things that other people have touched. That's a pandemic response that we might not be slow to change. So you're touching your phone. QR codes are great. Um, by the way, QR codes are also good for visitor cards, for those things that, we're asked people to fill out if you're new here, and then they can't find a pen that works in their aisle, and they don't know who to give it to. A QR code in the bulletin or in the pew rack saying, if you're new here, fill this out, and it links to a contact form, and it sends an email to the priest or the parish administrator. And then they set up a coffee date or get them on the newsletter or whatever they want. QR codes are really great and really important in our increasingly digital world. So please use it. Robin asks, is there a supplement to the collection blessing to include virtual donations? Yes, we include it in our materials in the Thanksgiving over the plates, but I've seen lots of ways that people do this, including just at the offertory to say, these are the gifts that have come forward. And we acknowledge that there are other gifts that have come in this week as a part of our online giving program. And we ask God to bless all of the gifts that have come in. So they don't need to be contained in a basket to be blessed. Just the words that the priest can say, and get the priest accustomed to that. They're queued up to raise the plate. They've been doing that for a long time. Remind them that the plate is in the cloud too. And so draw on that imagery of God coming down and filling that plate with gifts. I love it. Mary Jane would like the chat to be included. I will include it for you. We'll pop it into the email that I send later. Thanks for asking for it. All right, just a few more things, and then you're asking questions as we're going. So this is great. I have a couple more things. Charles, did you have something to say?
I was going to say, I think it's very important for people who give electronically and by credit card, there's something they can put in the offering plate. At our cathedral, we've got these green cards covered with plastic that says, I give electronic fund transfer. And I sat in church, I sit usually about third back. In front of me, mostly older people. I was the first pledge card plus envelope, I'm an old timer, to put in. All these people that grabbed it out of their pews and put it in. And it's important, I believe, for visitors who come to see people are giving that way, as well as for people in the congregation, because more people do it when they see other people the same age doing it, especially young people. It surprised me how many young people put in the green cards as opposed to cash or an envelope. So I really emphasize that's so important, because our dean says that. He says, listen, if you give electronically, please put in the green card. That way, I've gone to some churches, I wonder, half the people don't give anything.
Yeah, but they are giving, right? Because you don't see.
Yes, they are.
But, right.
That's
I like
that's
that.
why a simple card to put in means everybody can put something in. Thank you.
It's great to, and sometimes it's a little, it looks like a bookmark or a little token even you can do.
Yeah.
You put it in the plate as it comes by. Sometimes that manual act of being able to give something, even if it represents an online gift, is really just important for us as people who are used to the plate. So I appreciate that. Mary Jane asks that their priest says we don't bless the offering. That's interesting to me in and of itself. I think that all the gifts that come from the back of the church at the offertory to the altar are blessed, broken, shared, and given to the world, including the things that come in the plate. That's what we do with it. We bless it and share it. So I'm not sure what your priest does or doesn't do about blessing the plate. Maybe just acknowledging it if they're not comfortable with the language of it. Thank you for these gifts. We pray that they'll be best used. If that language is happier for the priest to use. It's just really important that we acknowledge that it has come up to the altar with the other gifts that we present at the offertory. It's one of those parts of our giving of the bread and the wine and our gifts. You can also put other things in there that represent our time and talent. I love that story as well. So you can do all kinds of things in what you're doing. So let's talk very quickly about some timeline stuff. So make sure that, so if you're starting your campaigns in September, uh, your 4-week deadline for sending a letter from the clergy to outline the theme this year and what the process for stewardship, it's coming up quick. So start thinking about that. You can download a sample letter from the materials that we provide and tweak it to fit your congregation. It's got language in there that is evergreen, but also you might want to change. So we recommend that a month before kickoff, you send that letter from the clergy saying, get ready, we're doing something. Maybe it's a great time for them to preach a stewardship sermon or to invite someone in to do that and to talk about stewardship, or hold a rector's forum about our gifts and where they go, something like that. And 2 weeks before your kickoff, that letter from the wardens should go out saying, here's what our budget is and our mission, and here's what we raise funds for. And this is a good time to send a test donation through your online giving portal and make sure it works. Make sure that the email that comes back to you is updated with this year's information, and that you have everything you need to go for that. So always test out your giving before you make it ready for everyone, because the last thing you want is for your campaign to start and people to say, the form isn't working, I can't get the website to load. So make sure it works. On that day of kickoff, or on that week of the kickoff, that's when that last letter right from the campaign chair goes out, celebrating the mission, talking about what we're doing. And if it is including, and that's where you include a pledge form, a brochure, anything like that. And if it's an email, you can attach those. If it's paper, you can do it that way. But those pledge cards or those promise intention cards should go out at that time, right at the kickoff. So people get it, they've heard about it, they've been hearing about it. Here it is, it's coming, and there we go. Use those weekly inserts to generate great conversations. Use the prayers of the people that bring the theme back in. We offer lots of prayers and other liturgical pieces throughout the campaign. And then know how you're going to finish your campaign. Is it going to finish on a date? Are you going to say, we're done? Are you going to have a party, a dinner, a lunch? Are you going to just quietly end the campaign and keep doing follow-up phone calls? When does the campaign end? And it's really important to know that, because ending a campaign, even if you haven't raised all the money yet, you're still collecting things. Sometimes saying, okay, folks, now we're doing something different. We did this window of the campaign. If you haven't heard from us yet, you'll continue to hear from us. And now we have some other things to say about the end of the year and how we're focusing on our life together. And we live in gratitude. So make sure that your campaign has an end and it just doesn't fizzle. Sometimes I've been in congregations where the follow-up to we still haven't received pledge forms from these 10 families, and that's going into Christmas and New Year, and we're still trying to get those gifts squared away. And so we haven't announced the campaign end yet. So people are feeling like, is it over? Is it done? What happened? Do something that says we're still working on it, or here's where we're at, or having a commitment Sunday is really great. I think I've said enough about how to end a campaign. Make sure everybody gets a note. Still in this digital world, thank you notes go a long way. And you can have a team of people writing them. They don't need to be specific. Your treasurer will send them the specific letter of, you pledged this amount on this date and here's the terms, or whatever they're doing. But your thank you note should just be gratitude. And maybe a little personal note. I love the way you sing, or I thank you for volunteering the way you do. You're raising a beautiful family, whatever you want to say in those thank you notes, besides thank you for your gift. It's really important. And then finally, TENS has some tools about evaluating your campaign and starting next year's process. So before you sweep up, before you put everything away, think about how you're going to take a look at how you did, what the performance was, what went well. Ask your stewardship committee, what would we change? How do we want to see this again? So I love that. I love that model. It's really important to do that. Al reminds us that personal handwritten notes scribbled on the margin of the acknowledgement letter are wonderful. Yes, I love that. Keep in mind, some congregations are touchy about who sees the financial information on a pledge. So if it's a personal note and it's from the treasurer or the rector, that might be okay. If it's going to the whole stewardship committee to sign those personal notes, but you're in a congregation where people don't want to share that information with any but a small number, just think that one through. There are lots of different ways for that to go well, or in some pitfalls that can be done. Depends on the history and practice of your congregation. Wow, that was a lot of information, and you guys have asked some great questions, and we still have some time left. So I'm going to pull us into our big group again to talk about it. Mary Jane, I know you really need that image. I finally took a picture of one, and I'm asking my designer to get you something better. I'm sorry that that's taken so long. Yeah, I keep telling you it's going to happen. It will. What other questions do you have? Kathy, are you clapping or are you asking a question? Oh, you're right.
No,
All right.
I have a question. I'm going back to the topic of legacy giving. So if I've made a legacy gift, shouldn't some kind of documentation be given to the church so that going down the road as rectors or treasurers change, that there's some kind of a record that this legacy gift is being made?
Ideally, that would be great. And I love it when people and members give us some paperwork. I've seen it implemented in all kinds of ways. Ultimately, though, some people choose to keep that information private and just say, I've done it, expect it one day, you'll get a letter or a check or something. But sometimes they include, I've seen churches that have a little form that say, here's, I'm leaving a bequest, and it might even be a copy of it, but wills can be changed and they're not always updated. It all depends. Sometimes they send them to the diocesan office, and people, and so the diocese holds this. If they have a planned giving officer, it might be in their files. People do all kinds of things. The most important thing that I want to say is when somebody is making a bequest or putting you in the will or doing anything with their estate, that they not only say the name of the church, but they also say the city and perhaps even the zip code. As a diocesan officer, sometimes I get letters from lawyers saying someone has left a gift to St. Paul's Church. I'm like, which one? I don't know what to do with this. We have lots of St. Paul's churches. And if we don't have any information about who that person was or where they went to church, I have to start calling up all the St. Paul's and saying, what do you know about this? Is there anything? So I love it. If you can get people to fill out paperwork, that's great. Charles, you have some wisdom about that, I bet.
I find we don't ask people to verify it. Most people don't want to do that, but we do have a form we send out asking them to sign that they've done it. Now, it has no legal thing, but it does mean they are serious about it. And then, of course, we list their names if they give permission in the front page of the bulletin twice a year. That encourages others. But I don't know any church that forces the thing. Universities do, I know, occasionally. that you have to prove you've done it with paperwork.
Well, I
Beyond
wasn't
saying, "Yes,
getting
I've
at,
done it."
I'm sorry, Father. I wasn't getting at it being a binding document, but perhaps the family, for instance, doesn't know that this conversation has taken place. Does the stewardship committee have those, or the priest have conversations with families that this was promised?
Yes, and I've only had one family be upset, and that was a greedy family. They were
There
upset.
are- yeah.
Their parents were giving any money to the church.
Yeah,
But that's the only exception. Normally, the reaction I get from families is, "Well, it was wonderful." Now, not giving the whole estate to the church. Okay, they give a portion of their estate. "Oh, my parents loved this place. That you were there for them when we were born, as we grew up and we moved. This church has been wonderful to us." That's the reaction I got from people family members. And now we're not talking about anybody's left all their estate to the church, but part of their estate to the church.
yeah. Thanks, Kathy, for that question. And Charles, thanks always for your experience and expertise. Yvonne, you've got a question. Come on off mute.
Thank you. Since the pandemic, our stewardship committee has dissolved and nobody has stepped up to do it. And so the wardens, myself and my other warden, are doing it. But just any suggestions you have for motivating people to join in?
Yes, so you'll find a webinar in our history called Forming and Training, or Recruiting and Training a Stewardship Committee. And you'll also find an article in our resource library to help you identify who makes a good stewardship committee person and what are some ways that we might recruit them and form them. Take a look at that because they're out there. Here's the people not to ask. Someone who says, "I hate talking about money and I don't want to." Don't ask them to be on the stewardship committee. Don't force anyone. I've known some rectors who say, "Everyone who comes into the vestry spends their first year on the stewardship team." Like, why? What if they hate this? This is a terrible idea. So make sure that you're asking people who really care about it and are ready to do that work, and then train them and support them. You'll also find in our resource library a list of stewardship committee job descriptions that kind of helps, like, what does the chair do? And what does the recording secretary do? And what does the event planning excitement person do? And what do just normal everyday members do? This can help you sort of say, here's a person who really throws a good party. I'm going to ask them on the committee to help with that. And here's someone who I know gets things done. So I'm going to ask them to form our, whatever. So take a look at, again, what are our skills? What are the gifts people are presenting? And how might they be used for stewardship? Not everybody is the best stewardship committee member, but there are a lot of people who don't know they could be. So find that balance. And if there's anything more deep that we can help you with, I'm happy to walk through that with you. But those articles and that webinar will help give you some ideas on who to look for. What are those hidden talents in your congregation? Thanks for that question. I see a question about in terms of size of the pledge card. I see lots of different ones. I see whole sheets that look kind of like a contract and they say lots of things. I like that. It's great. I've also, the tens pledge card is like a third of a page. And so, it's just a little leaflet really that can fit in an envelope without folding it. Those are good. I've seen them even smaller. So I don't think size of the pledge card matters so much as what you're doing with it. So if it becomes too small and you're trying to say too much, well, first you should look at what are you trying to say on a pledge card. Just ask the essential information. You want to know their name, their contact information, how much they're giving and what they'd like to be a part of, and some other questions about planned giving. But it's not the time to ask them to share their whole history. You want a pledge card is a call to action, asking for something very specific. We want to get that easily done. If you want to follow on later with a survey of, tell me more about your emotions and your history and your ideas, that's great. But the pledge card has a job to do. I say the shorter, the better. That's my opinion. Thank you. That's a great question. I know we're over time. Is there one more question out there that I can answer? Charles, you want to say something else?
I just want to say something about recruiting people. I believe if you make announcements, we need people for stewardship. Maybe every 5 or 6 years, somebody will volunteer. I believe you pray about people you want to have on, then ask them. Make an appointment to ask them. Have them come to the office. I used to take them out for lunch and say, oh, listen, I prayed about this, Carol. I really think it'd be great for the stewardship committee for these reasons. I hope you'll say yes. I wouldn't do it at a hospitality hour, coffee hour. I wouldn't do it over the phone. I would ask them in face-to-face after I prayed about it, and I've had wonderful response from that, rather than just asking them at hospitality hour, coffee hour, or giving them a phone call. This is important work they're asked to do. You can tell them why you think they'd be good on it. So they have a chance to really think about that and pray about that. Just some comments about how I believe asking people to do something.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Charles. Gail.
I just had a question on if you want to move to year-round stewardship and you're starting with your campaign in September, how do you get to, as TENS is recommending, have that new group ready to move, or perhaps the same group ready to move as early as Easter?
Mm-hmm. Great question. So, well, year-round stewardship is a whole philosophy of always talking about our abundance and our gratitude and tying it to our mission and ministry. It doesn't mean we're always asking for money. It means that we're always keeping the conversation alive about how our gifts impact the ministry and the ministry feeds the people, and it's just this year-round thing. Some congregations do ask for money year-round. I know one congregation that does it by your birthday month. That's when you renew your support. And so they're always raising money and always asking people to renew their giving. I think that's a lot of work, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful practice. When it comes to forming that stewardship committee by Easter, I think that's like the best practice to make certain. That's what we say, like, if you're doing a fall campaign, you should really by like May know who's on your committee. This is something to aspire to. We don't often get there until August in our churches, but if we can get them together before the summer, they have some time to form and think about, in maybe their vacation time or their relaxed time, what they're going to do. Maybe they've had some meetings before they all separate, as we do in the summer, to do our other things. There's been some time to have some talk about it. So that's why we suggest that a committee get started earlier in the year. Of course, if you want to do that January evaluation of last year's campaign, and then ask your stewardship committee who's up for another year, and how can we make it better, and just keep the conversation rolling, maybe have monthly meetings instead of weekly meetings or whatever. Keep that group going. Give them things to do. We have book studies and prayer ideas and Bible studies in our resource library that you can use with that committee year round to keep them focused on teaching the practices of abundance and gratitude in your church. So when I think about year-round stewardship, I don't necessarily mean we're always shaking people down for money, but what we're doing is keeping the conversation about our giving and its impact going throughout the way. If the only time of year people hear stewardship sermons or hear about stewardship is in the fall, they're conditioned not to think about abundance and gratitude the rest of the year. And I think then we're missing out on all those great teachings of the church that could be used for that work. So thank you for that question.
Well, thank you very much for your answer.
Well, folks, we are after our time, but I have loved the interaction and the questions and the chat. So I will make sure that a copy of today's chat goes out to y'all along with the slides, along with the video, and that should be coming in the next couple of days. I really appreciate your time on this Saturday, if it was your morning or your afternoon. Thank you for all that you do. And thanks for your work in the church. It's not easy to raise money for our congregations. I so appreciate that y'all are doing it. Let us know how we can help. Reach out to me anytime. I love talking about money and meeting with people. So see you later. Have a beautiful Saturday.